Lesson 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, all about solving quadratics by factoring. Now we've already covered lessons 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, and 8.6, factoring. Now we're going to go back and solve the problems with the equal signs now that you know how to factor all of the types. So the first thing we need to talk about is the zero product property, which states that the only way to get 0 with multiplication is to have one of the numbers or both of them be 0. So the only way to get AB equal to 0 is to have A be 0, B be 0, or both of them be 0. So here's a small example to get us started. So x plus 4 times x minus 5 equals 0. So one of those parentheses has to be 0. Either x plus 4 is 0 or x minus 5 is 0. So we can either set up a little equation to solve each one, or some of these are small enough we can figure out in our head. What number plus 4 equals 0? That's right, negative 4. And what number minus 5 equals 0? That's right, 5. Those are the two answers to the solutions. Negative 4 and positive 5. So if you can figure out these small little equations, you can solve a problem by factoring. Now, let's do the first two together, and then you can try C and D by yourself. So in A, we've got two factors, 3n and n plus 2. Now for the first one, what times 3 makes 0? So 3 times 0 actually equals 0. So for that one, since there's no plus or minus, n has to be a 0. Now for the second parenthesis, n plus 2. The opposite of plus 2 is negative 2. So n would have to equal negative 2 for the second part. So your two answers are negative 2 and 0. And now for the B, you've got x plus 7. The opposite of plus 7 is negative 7. And the opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. Because if you put a positive 4, subtract 4, you'll get 0. So your two answers are negative 7 and positive 4. Now, to solve C, you have to find out what each one would be to be 0. But when you do D, you're going to have to factor it first. You see, I already put A and B in two parentheses and factored them for you. So you're going to have to recall what we did in 8.2 to see if you can factor D and then do it. So go ahead and pause here and try these two. Alright, so in order to get C, this one may be a little more difficult because there's a number in front of Y. So let's write out the problem. 3y minus 5 equal to 0. Now if I'm going to solve this, I would add 5 to both sides. So I would get 3y equals 5. And then when there's a number in front, you divide by it. So the answer would be y equals 5 over 3. So it's okay to get a fraction for these. And for the other problem, y would equal 2, because 2 minus 2 is 0. So our two answers are 5 over 3 and 2. Now let's take a look at D. We need to factor, so we need to figure out the greatest common factor. So look at 8 and 40 and say, what's the biggest number that divides both 8 and 40? And it's 8. Also, there's an x in both ones, both the 40 and the 8x squared. So I can divide by 8 for both of them. So when I divide by 8x, I'm going to put my results in the parentheses and put the 8x in the beginning so that if I wanted to distribute it back, I could. So 8 divided by 8 is 1. Subtract exponents. 2 minus 1 for the x just gives us an x. Negative 40 divided by 8 is negative 5. The x's cancel out. And this is what my problem is equal to now. And just like in A, 8x has to be equal to 0, so x has to equal 0 for the 8x part. And for the x minus 5 part, x has to be 5. So those are my two answers, 0 and 5. All right, let's move on to the next type of problem. All right, these are problems from 8.3, where we have to factor and then solve the two parentheses. So if you remember, when you have a trinomial, it's what multiplies to the last number and what adds to the middle number. So, negative 48 is negative 1 times 48. That's not going to work. Or negative 48 times 1. Neither one of those is going to add up to negative 8. 2 and 24 are going to give me the result I want. Let's see. 4 and 12. I think 4 and 12 might give us what we're looking for because we need negative 8. And negative 12 plus 4 is negative 8. So the factors for A are x minus 12 and x plus 4. Now please remember that the factors are not the solutions because this is still equal to 0. The factors are actually the opposite of the solution. You see, x minus 12 is the factor. 12 will make that equal to 0. X plus 4 is the factor. Negative 4 will make that equal to 0. So our two answers are negative 4 and 12. I always put the smaller one first. And for B, remember, you can't start a problem unless it's equal to 0. So that 70's got to be moved over, and when you do, it becomes negative 70. So now you need to figure out what two numbers multiply and give you 70, negative 70, that add up to negative 3. I'm thinking it's going to be maybe negative 7 and 10, or negative 10 and 7. And negative 10 and 7 add up to negative 3. So my two factors will be x, or z, minus 10, z plus 7. Now, those two are the opposite of my answer. Z equals 10, and z equals negative 7, because I need the opposite of the number in the parenthesis. So my two solutions are negative 7 and 10. All right, go ahead and take a moment and try C and D. All right, so negative 12, that's negative 2 and 6. I don't think that's going to work. How about negative 3 and 4? I got to have a positive 1. So I think that's going to be negative 3 and positive 4. So x minus 3, x plus 4. So I'm going to have factors of positive 3 and negative 4. So my solution is negative 4 and positive 3. Now I hope before you did D, you first moved the 18 over and made it negative. And then two numbers that make 18, there's a negative 6 and a 3. or a negative 3 and a 6. Let's see which one adds up to positive 3. That would be negative 3 and positive 6. So x minus 3, x plus 6. So if it's negative 3 in the parenthesis, it's positive 3 on the outside. And if it's positive 6 inside, it's negative 6 as a solution. So my two answers are negative 6 and 3. Okay, let's look at the next slide. All right, these are problems where there's a number in front of the x squared. These come out of 8.4. So, but as always, you have to start out equal to 0. So 2x squared minus 5x minus 88. And then when there's a number in front, look to see if you can divide by the greatest common factor. Can you divide by 2, which is the number in front, into 5 and 88? No, you can't divide it into 5. So let's do some slide and divide. So 2 times 88. That's going to change this to x squared minus 5x minus 167. Now you need to figure out which two numbers multiply to be negative 176 and add up to negative 5. Now you may want to use a calculator to help you with this. You can take 176 and start dividing by the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on until you find the right one that will have a difference of 5. And the one you're looking for is 11 and 16. 11 times 16 makes 176. And if you make the 16 be the negative, you'll get the negative 5 that's in the middle. So my factors are going to change to x plus 11 and x minus 16. Don't forget to go back and divide by the 2. Now, here's where we normally slide the 2 in front of the x because 2 doesn't go into 11. But we don't need to slide, we need to find the solutions. So remember, what's in the parenthesis is the opposite of the solution. So the solution in this case is not positive 11 over 2, it's negative 11 over 2. And the solution is not negative 16 over 2, but positive 16 over 2. And how much? And what is 16 divided by 2? It's 8. So your two answers were negative 11 over 2, which you can convert to decimal if you want, and 8. So you don't have to slide it. When you get the two factors in the parenthesis, simply change their sign and write them down as the solution. All right, you should pause here if you want to try to do these three. I'm going to start them in a few seconds. All right, first let's make it positive 30. 2x squared minus 17x plus 30. Got to move that 30 over. Now, I wish I could divide by 2, but 2 won't go into 17. So I'm going to multiply and change the last number to 60. And then which two numbers make 60? Add up to 17. I think, let's see, 6 times 10. That's not going to work. That's going to be 60. I bet What will make 17? Okay, I think what happened was this is supposed to be a positive 30. So when I moved it over, it should have became a negative 30. So let's fix that real quick. So that's negative 30, and then when I times by 2 is negative 60. Now I can figure out that which two numbers make 60 that add up to negative 17. And what I'm looking for is negative 20 and positive 3. Negative 20 and positive 3. So x minus 20, x plus 3. Don't forget to go back and divide by 2. Now 2 does go into 20 10 times. Since in the parenthesis it's negative 20, my answer is going to be positive 10. Because 20 divided by 2 is 10. Here, 2 doesn't go into 3, but since it's negative 3, my answer will be, well, this time, since it's positive in the parenthesis, it will be negative 3 as a solution. And I'll write my answer, negative 3 over 2, comma, 10. All right, let's look at these last two. Once again, not equal to 0. So 3x squared minus 2x minus 21. Unfortunately, I can't divide by the greatest common factor. So times by 3. That's going to make that 63. Now, which two numbers make 63? I believe 9 and 7 do. And if I want my 2 to be negative, I'll make the 9 be the negative number. So I have x minus 9, x plus 7. Don't forget to divide by the number you times by, which is 3. 3 goes into 9 3 times, so that would be x minus 3, which tells me x is going to equal positive 3. Since 3 doesn't go into 7, x is going to equal a negative 7 over 3, always the opposite. And I'll write my answer, negative 7 over 3, comma 3. And in my last problem over here, I already have equals 0. But it looks like I need to times by 3. So I've got 60, and what adds up to 17? Okay, so 12 times 5 makes 17. So I'm going to put x minus 12, or sorry, x plus 12 and x plus 5, because they add up to positive 17. Go back and divide by 3. 3 goes into 12 4 times, so x equals negative 4, always the opposite. 3 doesn't go into 5, so I'm just going to put a negative sign in front of my fraction, 5 over 3. And so I'm going to write my answers, negative 4 and negative 5 over 3. And those are my solutions. All right, let's move on to the fourth slide. So here we have unhappy couples. So you can factor these unhappy couples. 25 is 5 and 5. X squared puts an x with each one of those 5s. The only way to get negative 100 is to put minus 10 and positive 10. Now this is one way to do the problem, and then you can solve each of those two factors. Or you could have divided by 25 first. If you notice, both numbers were divisible by 25. So you would get x squared minus 4 equals 0. And that's a much smaller problem to solve. And it would result in two parentheses, x minus 2, x plus 2. You wouldn't have had to do anything with that 25 in the front because it's a number, doesn't have a variable. If there's no variable part of it, then it doesn't have any bearing on the solution at all. Now here you can tell the answer is going to be negative 2 and positive 2. If you had wanted, you could have solved this up here. You could have added 10, and you would have gotten 5x equals 10. You would have divided by 5 and gotten 2. Would have worked on the other side, and you would have also gotten negative 2. Now, if you like doing it that way, which is fine, or you can apply the square root property. If you have two numbers, look, x squared is on one side, 44 is on the other side. Move the x to one side, move the number to the other side. If you want to get rid of a square, square root it. The square root and a square cancel each other out. And you just get x. Now the square root of 144 is 12. But there's also another number that when multiplied will give you 144. You see 12 times 12 equals 144. But negative 12 times negative 12 is also 144. So technically the square root of 144 is not just 12, it's 12 or negative 12. So you can write plus or minus sign. You can write plus and a minus sign in front of the 12 so you don't have to write the number 12 twice. So x is negative 12 and positive 12. So you can simply write that to save time. Now let me show you how to do that one more time. You've got 81 and 9x squared. Move the 81 to the other side so that you get 9x squared equals 81. How do you get rid of the number in front of the x? That's right, divide. So x squared equals 81 divided by 9. That goes nicely, turns into 9. How do you get rid of an x squared? Square root. What's the square root of 9? Plus or minus 3. Now hopefully you know what to do with the 25 in front of the x squared. If you said divide, that's right. Go ahead and divide by 25. So you get x squared equals 81 over 25. If you divide it, you're just going to get a decimal, and you're going to need to keep using the calculator from here. If you don't divide it and leave it as a fraction, that's fine too, because the next step is to get rid of the x squared, the square root. So we square and the square root cancel each other out, and we just get x. Now, the reason I didn't divide and change the decimal is I knew I was going to take the square root in 2 seconds. And the square root of 81 is 9. The square root of 25 is 5. So I'm going to write plus or minus 9 over 5. Because the square root of 81 is plus or minus 9. All right, let's look at the last example. These are the perfect square ones. This is from lesson 8.6. So look for GCFs. Do you see a GCF in A? Divide by 4. X squared minus 6x plus 9. Now, you can write the 4, but it's not necessary. Unless there's an x in the front, it's not part of the answer. So what times what makes x squared? That'd be x and x. And what times what makes 9? That adds up to negative 6. A negative 3 and another negative 3. So what makes x minus 3 equal to 0? Positive 3. The same for this parenthesis. See, they're both the same. So you don't write x equals 3, x equals 3 twice. You simply put 3 inside the brackets because you only have to write the answer once. All right, let's look at B. Notice it doesn't equal 0. Start moving stuff over. 80 comes over, it turns negative. 400 comes over, it turns positive. Do you see a GCF? Good. Divide by it. $80 divided by 4 makes 20. 400 divided by 4 makes 100. Now hopefully you can make the two factors that you need. What times what makes 100 adds up to negative 20. That should be a negative 10 and a negative 10. I don't need you to tell me the answer is 10 twice, so just put 10 inside the fancy brackets. All right, go ahead and take a moment and do C and D. I'll start them here in a second. Okay, so that negative 25's got to come over. Makes it positive 25. Greatest common factor, don't see one. So since this is a perfect square, 81's a perfect square, so is 25. I'm going to try to factor it using the perfect square. So 81 is 9 times 9. So 9x, 9x. 25 is 5 times 5. If you want to get a negative number in the middle, you're going to have to put two negative signs in front of your 5s. Now to be sure this works, 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 5 is 45. Now they're both negative 45s, but they equal the negative 90 in the middle. So this worked. Now all you have to do is solve one of these parentheses. So it looks like I need to add 5. So 9x equals 5. Put the 9 on the bottom, and I discovered that my answer is 5 over 9. So put little fancy brackets around a 5 with a 9 on top, with a 9 on the bottom. And our final question already equals 0. Do you see a greatest common factor? If you think you can divide, divide. Hopefully you're thinking you can divide, I'm hoping by 8, because I know 8 goes into 8 and 8 goes into 88. My only question is, does 8 go into 242? Check the calculator, and it doesn't. It comes out to be 30.25, so that's not going to work. So don't divide by 8. What's another number I can divide by, though? 2? Okay, let's start with 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 88 divided by 2 is negative 44. And 242 divided by 2 is 121. Well, that's a perfect square. So let me see if factoring by perfect squares works. 4 is 2x, 2x. 121 is 11 times 11. If I want that negative in the middle, I'm going to have to put two minus signs. And if I double check, 2 times 11, that's negative 22. 2 times 11 is another negative 22. That does equal the 44 in the middle. So this is the correct factoring. Now all I have to do is solve one of these parentheses. 2x minus 11 equals 0. Add 11. 2x equals 11. Put that 2 on the bottom, and you get 11 over 2. So in little fancy brackets, I'm going to put 11 on the top and 2 on the bottom. And that's how you solve quadratics using the factoring that you already know.